In Victorian England, cleanliness could kill. Not a disease, not a crime. An ordinary bath, hot water, a closed room, silence. London, 19th century. A city of smoke, coal, and sewage odors. Where most people didn't wash not out of laziness, but out of fear. Because people believed water opens the pores, weakens the body, letting in death. And they had reason to think so. Gas heaters without ventilation, poisonous fumes, sudden loss of consciousness. People would go into the bathroom and never come out again. One evening, one room, one mistake. Death without a scream. But the real horror is that this is not superstition. This was reality. Would you dare to wash yourself if you knew it could be the last decision of your life? This is not a horror story. This is history. When cleanliness became a risk. Imagine a morning in Victorian London. Not the London we see on postcards today, not a city of glitz and tourist windows, but 19th century London, heavy, smoky, humid. The air here doesn't just smell, it's oppressive. The smoke from thousands of coal-fired ovens hangs over the streets like a low ceiling. The smell of burning mingles with horse manure, sewage, the dampness of the Thames. And among it all, people. Thousands of people. Alive, in a hurry, unwashed, but not because they don't care, but because cleanliness no longer seems safe. A few generations ago, water was associated with life. Rivers, rain, wells, a natural part of everyday existence. But the industrial age changed everything. Cities grew faster than the understanding of hygiene. The water in London was often dirty even before it reached homes. The Thames actually served as both a water source and a sewer. People saw this, and they drew conclusions. A strange, almost paradoxical belief emerged. Water is dangerous. Not the cold, not the draft, the very act of washing. Because Victorian medicine had its own logic. It was believed that hot water opens the pores of the skin, and open pores are the gateway to disease. The body after a bath seemed to become vulnerable, weakened, unprotected, especially to the so-called miasmas, harmful vapors that, as was believed at the time, caused disease. And if you think about it in the context of that time, this doesn't sound so absurd. London stank. Literally. Sewage flowed through open channels. The streets were covered with dirt, waste, and rot. If the air was poisonous, wouldn't the body be dangerous after a hot bath? So the fear was not just a superstition. It was a reaction to the city, to the smells, to a mortality that no one could yet explain. In many homes, full bathing was becoming a rarity. People washed their faces, their hands, sometimes their necks, but full immersion in water? It was almost an event. A risky event, especially among the working class, where baths were a luxury, where water had to be heated by hand, where the cold in a room could kill as badly as illness. Wet body plus damp house plus winter air equals real danger. And here comes another idea. Dirt is protection. Yes, it sounds strange, but the layer of sweat, dust, soot was perceived as something like a barrier, like a natural shell. Washing is the removal of this protection. Now imagine a person of that time. He hears, "Don't wash too often. A bath weakens. It's easy to get sick after bathing." And around him, examples. Someone lay down after washing. Someone caught a cold. Someone died. The reasons? Then they were explained simply. Water. But the real danger hadn't even begun yet, because ahead, technologies, gas, speakers, private bathrooms, a comfort that looked like progress, and that opened up a new type of death. Silent, invisible, almost mystical. But more on that later. In the next chapter, we'll go into the Victorian bathroom and see why a place designed for cleanliness sometimes became a trap. The room where water was silent. Imagine a small room in a Victorian house. The door is closed. The window, if there is one, is tightly closed to keep out the cold. The air is still, almost thick. This is not a luxurious, aristocratic bathroom. This is a typical space of the urban middle class of the late 19th century. The walls are pale, slightly damp from constant humidity. The tiles are cold, even when the room is warm. The mirror is slightly fogged. And in the center is the bathtub, heavy, cast iron, with worn enamel, with taps that sometimes creak like old doors. The water fills it slowly, a dull sound, as if someone is pouring silence. No music, no noise of the city, just drops, just a breath. For a person of that time, bathing was almost a ritual. The water was heated separately. It was carried in buckets. Or, if you were lucky, they used a new convenience, a gas boiler, a symbol of progress. Gas in Victorian England was everywhere. Streetlights, lanterns, stoves, heating, and now hot water. No firewood, no long waits. Almost a miracle. But this miracle had a condition: invisible, deadly. Gas appliances of the early generations rarely had proper ventilation. The flame burned oxygen. It emitted carbon monoxide. Odorless, colorless, without warning. And then a person enters the bathroom. The door is closed to keep warm. The window is closed to keep out drafts. The room becomes airtight. At first, nothing. Warm water, relaxation, slight dizziness, which is easy to write off as fatigue. Then, a strange heaviness in the chest, as if the air has become different, as if there is not enough of it. The head is spinning more. The arms are weakening. But the person does not understand what is happening, because there is no pain, no panic, only drowsiness, dangerous drowsiness. Sometimes they were found later. The water is already cold. The body is motionless. The face is calm, almost as if the person had simply fallen asleep. The gas left no obvious traces. No wounds, no struggle, only silence. The gas bath became the place of a new type of death, silent, homely, completely unexpected. But the problem was not only in technology, it was also in trust. People believed that gas was progress, that hot water was comfort, that the bath was safe. And it was this belief that made the trap perfect, because the danger that is not visible most often turns out to be fatal. Medicine that wasn't looking in the right direction. When strange deaths began to occur in Victorian homes, the doctors were the first to look for answers. And the answer sounded familiar. Weak heart, nervous exhaustion, sudden stroke. A person was found in the bathtub. No signs of struggle, no scream, no apparent cause. The face was calm. The body was motionless. And almost always the same explanation: natural death. The problem was within the knowledge of the time. Carbon monoxide already existed, but its dangers were not yet fully understood. It had no odor. It was not irritating. It did not cause immediate pain. But Victorian medicine thought differently. A disease must have symptoms: pain, fever, visible signs. If they are absent, then the cause is inside. The idea of apoplexy was especially popular, a term used to explain almost any sudden loss of consciousness or death. Convenient, universal, and almost never checked. A body in a bathtub? The heat had dilated the blood vessels. The pressure had changed. The heart could not stand it. The logic sounded convincing, and most importantly, it did not require asking uncomfortable questions about gas, about ventilation, about dangerous appliances in new, modern houses. The doctors also lived in the same city. They also used gas. They also trusted in progress. To admit that an ordinary bathroom could kill was to question the very idea of comfort. And Victorian society didn't like cracks in the picture of order. Progress was supposed to be safe. Technology was a blessing. Home was a place of protection. So death in the bath was turning into a personal tragedy, not a systemic problem. But there were details that didn't fit into the usual explanations. Too many cases, too similar circumstances, too often in new houses with gas columns. Some doctors began to notice a strange pattern: death without pain, without illness, without a background. The person felt normal and suddenly didn't wake up. The first suspicions appear: an invisible enemy, air that looks ordinary. But even then the truth was moving slowly. Because carbon monoxide leaves no dramatic scenes. It doesn't create chaos. It doesn't scream. It puts you to sleep. Gently, quietly, convincingly. And while medicine was learning to understand the new danger, people continued to go into bathrooms, which seemed perfectly safe. An evening that ended in silence. London, late 19th century. A middle-class house. A quiet street. Gas lights outside the windows. An ordinary evening, no different from 100 others. She didn't feel sick. No fever, no pain. Just tiredness after a long day. So familiar, so ordinary. A hot bath seemed the perfect end to the day. Relaxation, warmth, a few minutes of peace in a world that was constantly noisy. The water was heated by a gas stove. New, modern, comfortable. No wood, no ash, no hassle. The door closes. The click of the lock sounds quiet, almost symbolic. The room slowly fills with heat. The gas burns evenly. A small flame, almost beautiful. Steam rises from the water. The mirror becomes cloudy. The contours blur. At first, there is a pleasant relaxation. The body becomes heavier in the warm water. Thoughts slow down. Then a slight dizziness, barely noticeable, the kind that is easy to ignore. A few more minutes. The air becomes different. Not sharp, not disturbing, just heavier. The heart beats slower. Slowly, the feeling of tension disappears. Slowly, the clarity disappears. No scream, no blow, no struggle. Only drowsiness, inexorable, warm, insurmountable. The water was cold when they found her. The candle was almost out. The gas had long since gone out. Her face was calm, almost as if she had simply dozed off. The gas had left no dramatic evidence, just a question. The newspapers reported such cases cautiously. A tragic incident, a sudden death, a strange incident in the bathroom. But readers were beginning to notice. Too frequent, too similar, too quiet. The bathroom, a place of purity, was slowly acquiring a different reputation, a place of risk. And the scariest thing was that people were dying in their own homes, in the space that was supposed to be the safest, without a perpetrator, without noise, without a chance to understand what had happened. The smell that didn't exist. The fear of the bathroom in Victorian society grew not because of panic, but because of repetition. Quiet, stubborn, inexorable. The newspapers wrote cautiously, no loud headlines, no word poisoning, only restrained wording. Found without signs of violence, sudden loss of consciousness, a sad incident in the bathroom. But readers read between the lines, because the stories coincided strangely. A closed room, hot water, a gas appliance, and silence. People began to whisper, in kitchens, in living rooms, in the corridors of apartment buildings. Bathrooms are dangerous. Gas in a small room is a trap. It's better not to take any chances. The irony was cruel. Gas had a smell in people's minds, pungent, tangible, warning. But the most deadly part of it, carbon monoxide, smelled nothing. Invisible danger always seems less real, because the body doesn't sound the alarm. There's no stench, no burning, no instinctive rejection, just a strange lethargy, a slight dizziness, sleepiness, a feeling that could easily be mistaken for fatigue. And that's what made the situation especially dangerous. The person wasn't running, he was relaxing. A new behavior is emerging in many homes. The bathroom door no longer closes tightly. Windows, if they exist, are left open, even in winter. Some families refuse hot baths altogether. They switch to quick wiping, to bowls, to cold water, because fear changes habits faster than medicine. A new paradox of the era appears. A city that gradually discovered the importance of hygiene, and people who increasingly avoided washing thoroughly. Not because of poverty, not because of lack of water, but because of a sense of threat. The bath ceases to be a symbol of comfort. It becomes a place of uncertainty. Because how can we trust a space in which people fall asleep and do not wake up? Progress that required air. The Victorian era adored progress. New machines, new systems, new conveniences. Gas had a special place in this list. It meant light without candles, heat without constant ash, hot water without hours of waiting, the future that has already come. Houses were modernized. Gas pipes were hidden in the walls. Speakers were installed in bedrooms, kitchens, bathrooms. Compact, convenient, modern. But there was one detail that was often forgotten: air. Builders sought to make housing warmer, fewer drafts, fewer gaps, less cold air from the street. Tightness equals comfort. But for gas appliances, it meant something different: less oxygen, worse combustion, more carbon monoxide. The flame looked normal, a barely noticeable fluctuation that no one perceived as a danger signal. Because the device is working, the water is heating, the light is on, so everything is fine. No one saw how the room slowly changed, how the oxygen disappears, how the air becomes poisonous. No noise, no color, no smell. Paradoxically, new houses often became the most dangerous. More modern, warmer, better insulated. What was supposed to protect against the cold created ideal conditions for a gas trap. The first technical discussions appear about ventilation holes, about chimneys, about the need for air circulation. But change doesn't come instantly, because progress isn't just about technology, it's about inertia. People don't like to hear that a new convenience can be dangerous, especially if it's already become a part of everyday life. Gas continues to enter homes, along with comfort, along with warmth, along with risk. And while engineers argue and manufacturers promise safer models, ordinary families continue to live in spaces where the air can be treacherous. When rumors became fear. Bathroom deaths were rarely dramatic. No broken furniture, no screams in the middle of the night. Just a story told in whispers. Neighbors learned not from official reports, but from random phrases. "Did you hear? In the house on the corner. They say in the bathroom." London lived by rumors, sometimes faster than facts. The cases piled up. One family, another street, another house. An all too familiar scenario. People began to connect the dots. Gas, a closed room, hot water, and a sudden silence. Fear didn't explode. It settled, like coal dust on furniture. New phrases appear in conversations. "Don't stay in the bath for too long." "Don't close the door tightly." Gas is dangerous in warm steam. And along with this, old beliefs are given new life. Water weakens. A bath exhausts. The body is vulnerable after a bath. Now, this doesn't sound like a medical theory, but like a confirmed experience, especially among women. Victorian society already considered the female body to be more sensitive, more delicate, prone to fainting. Death in the bath easily fit into a familiar image: weakness, nerves, fragility. Gas remained in the shadow of explanations, because the fear of it had not yet had a clear form. But the atmosphere was changing. The bath ceased to be just an interior item. It became a place of disturbing associations. Warm water no longer always meant comfort. Sometimes it meant risk. And the most interesting thing, even those who did not believe in the danger began to behave more cautiously. Not out of conviction, out of feeling. Because when stories are repeated often enough, society begins to change its behavior even before official explanations. The body after a bath. In Victorian culture, a bath was not just about cleanliness. It was about the state of the body, about what happens after. There was a strong belief: bathing is exhausting. Doctors advised caution: not too hot water, not too long, not too often, because the body in the water supposedly lost strength. The heat relaxed the blood vessels, the heart worked differently, the blood circulation changed. To a modern person, this sounds like a partial truth, exaggerated by fear. But in the 19th century, it was perceived almost as a law of physiology. They were especially afraid of sudden weakness. When a person gets out of the bath and feels dizziness, trembling, softness in the legs, the symptoms are familiar to many today, but then they seemed like a sign of a dangerous imbalance. Water was associated with a risk to the nervous system. Too hot a bath was overload. Too cold a bath was shock. The body was thought of as a fragile mechanism that could easily be broken. Hence the strange caution in daily hygiene. Full immersion in water was not supposed to be a regular habit. It was almost a procedure. Sometimes it was almost a test, especially for children. Parents worried that a hot bath would weaken the body, that the child would become vulnerable to colds, fevers, dangerous fumes. For the elderly, the risk seemed even more serious. The heart might not be able to handle it. The heat is too strong. It's better not to experiment. Thus, the bath gradually acquired a reputation for double danger: gas in the room and weakness of the body. Even without carbon monoxide, bathing remained an event that required caution. People got up slowly. They got out carefully. They wrapped themselves in blankets. Because after a bath, one could not suddenly go out into the cold. This was considered an almost guaranteed way to get sick. And this made sense. Damp houses, drafts, lack of stable heating. A wet body could really become a problem. The fear of bathing arose from more than one source. It was a tangle: medicine, living conditions, gas, personal experience. And in this tangle, cleanliness sometimes looked like a risky act. When cleanliness became a class luxury in Victorian England, the attitude towards bathing depended not only on fears, but also on money. A bathroom in the house is a privilege, not a symbol of hygiene, a symbol of status. In the homes of wealthy families, private bathrooms appear, spacious, with windows, with ventilation, with servants who prepare hot water. Bathing here is almost a pleasure, a ritual of comfort, time that can be afforded without rushing. In working-class neighborhoods, the reality is different. Overcrowded rooms, shared beds, minimal privacy, no bathtub. Sometimes, not even constant access to hot water. Washing becomes a logistical problem. Water has to be brought in. Heat it. Use with caution. A full bath is becoming a rare occurrence. Not because of indifference, because of difficulty. Hence the culture of partial washing: a bowl, a rag, hands, face, neck. It's fast, practical, realistic. Public baths existed, but they too had a reputation for being controversial places. On the one hand, cleanliness. On the other, crowds, noise, shared spaces, doubts about sanitation. For many, it looked not as comfort, but as discomfort, sometimes as a risk. Social distancing even manifested itself in smells. The wealthy masked the city's smoke with perfume. The poor got used to the smell of work, soot, and the street. And gradually, a dangerous confusion arises. Cleanliness equals sophistication. Dirt equals mundaneness. Hygiene begins to be read as a marker of class. But even in wealthy homes, the bathroom was not completely devoid of anxiety. Gas appliances were everywhere. The risk remained. The difference was only in the chances. More space, better air, less chance of a fatal mistake. And yet the fear of bathing strangely united different classes, for different reasons, with different explanations, but with similar caution. Because regardless of wealth, a person in a closed bathroom was left alone with what he could not see, the moment when the truth began to emerge. By the end of the 19th century, strange deaths could no longer be ignored. Too many cases, too similar circumstances. Doctors, engineers, and officials began to ask an uncomfortable question. What if the problem was in the air? Carbon monoxide was increasingly appearing in professional discussions, not as a theory, as a suspect. The problem was the complexity of the evidence. The gas was invisible. It disappeared quickly. It left no obvious traces. Early diagnostic methods were limited. Many deaths remained in the column "undetermined cause." But the accumulation of observations did its job. A closed room, a gas appliance, lack of ventilation. Too clear a pattern. Recommendations are starting to change. Be careful. Without a big announcement. Vents become desirable. Ventilation is a sensible precaution. Manufacturers of gas appliances react slowly. First, denial, then minimal improvements. Society does not change overnight either. Because the truth about the dangers of progress always sounds uncomfortable, especially when this progress is already built into everyday life. Gas equals light. Gas equals heat. Gas equals modernity. Recognizing the risk meant rethinking the very idea of home safety. But change is beginning. Slow. Fragmentary. Architects pay more attention to air circulation. Doctors describe sudden deaths in the bathtub more cautiously. Fear is being rephrased. Less mysticism, more physics. And yet, for the average person of that time, the bathroom remained a space of uncertainty for a long time. Because even when the reason becomes clearer, the danger doesn't disappear immediately. New rules of caution. When the connection between gas and sudden deaths became more obvious, the era began to respond not with panic, but with rules. Not with sharp prohibitions, not with revolution, with the slow introduction of caution into everyday life. A new logic of behavior appears. Ventilate. Don't close tightly. Don't trust warmth and silence completely. Ventilation grills become the norm in new houses. A small detail which was previously considered insignificant. Engineers improve gas appliances. More stable combustion. Better removal of combustion products. The language of doctors is also slowly changing. Fewer universal apoplexies. More suspicion of gas poisoning. But the most interesting thing is happening in people's minds. The bath ceases to be a place of blind trust. It becomes a procedure that requires attention. People begin to listen to the space, the sound of the flame, the quality of the air, their own feelings. Dizziness is no longer attributed solely to fatigue. Weakness is not always nerves. A new everyday instinct appears. If something is wrong, get out. It seems simple, but for the 19th century, this was a real change in thinking. Because before, the home was considered automatically safe. Now, it is conditionally safe. Progress no longer looked completely innocent. It demanded understanding. And yet, the fear of bathing did not disappear immediately. Habits last longer than explanations. The memory of strange deaths in the bath lived on for a long time in conversations, advice, and family warnings. Water was no longer just a comfort. Gas was just a convenience. The age was learning a new kind of survival, living among technologies that could make mistakes. Cleanliness that stopped scaring. Time has passed. The city has changed. The buildings have changed. The understanding of dangers has also changed. What once seemed like an almost mystical threat has received a simple explanation. Air, gas, ventilation. Carbon monoxide is no longer an invisible mystery. It has become a technical problem. Standards are emerging, requirements for appliances, for chimneys, for air circulation. The bathroom is slowly regaining its reputation as a safe place, a place of care, comfort, private peace. Fear, once part of everyday thinking, is becoming history. But this history leaves behind an important mark. The Victorians were afraid of washing not only because of superstition. Their fear was born on the edge of limited knowledge, dangerous technologies, real deaths. And therein lies the main lesson. Danger often appears where we see only convenience. Progress does not always look threatening. Sometimes it looks like comfort, warm water, a quiet room, an ordinary evening. And that is why the stories of the past sound so modern. Because the question remains, how many things in our lives do we consider absolutely safe just because they have become familiar? Would you recognize the danger if you lived in that London? Would you dare to take a hot bath, knowing that silence is sometimes the last sound? This is not a horror story. This is history.